You started out as a kid that was kind of a roughneck, and then that led you to go help kids that you saw some of that part of yourself in. And now you're making leaders, which is the hallmark of the best leaders.
Logan Cohen is a trauma therapist and childhood abuse survivor
who spent years rehabilitating violent teens in the wilderness.
My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor, and his 6 other siblings and both parents shipped off to Auschwitz. So I had this really strong juxtaposition really early of what oppression looks like, and then what a stance of integrity and courage without dominance looks like. And there was a parent bully in my household, pinned me in this location and was engaging me in the submission ritual that had always worked to force my compliance historically. And I realized that I was a little bit bigger now and that I could make this way more difficult for them. And I did, fought my way out. And the dynamic started changing after that. I could force independence if I needed to.
Some of the young guys I work with, their big challenge is they've never had an opportunity for anything like that moment. They've had complete unearned safety. When you're working with those guys, how do you get some of those lessons to them? I think that's a really powerful frame for seeking the support that you need in your life for these things. What about the guys that are looking to make an impact on younger men?
You're here for a reason, and you always have been. It's even your destiny to do this. Who are you to keep yourself from the world? Who are you to keep yourself from us? Our children need you. Come join us.
Hey, Logan, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell folks a little bit about why you're qualified to talk about leadership and what your background is?
My clinical background, or my by training, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Do clinical supervision for the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, as well as a level 2 clinical certified trauma professional. I've been working with folks in the field for about 20 years, specializing in supporting couples and families through navigating high conflict situations. And either tapping into the leadership within themselves or providing leadership for their families and for their children, and doing some trauma recovery work concurrent within all of that. In the last few years, specifically, I've developed a company called True North Leadership Solutions, where we create custom leadership development curriculums for corporations. And most specifically, recently, it's been manufacturing companies, interestingly. A lot of fun doing that work.
I like that more and more kind of masculine spaces are getting in softer skills for leadership. It's really helpful for me. And
for them too.
Yeah, right. Well, what I like about your background, man, is it started, on the individual, right? That's our clinical work, is picking apart a person. And then you LMFTs do a really good job of bringing that into a system and seeing how the working parts move. And then building on that base it's been consistent. What's funny is anytime I talk to people about men's clinical work and they start talking about couples work, the big complaint is that guys going into couples work feel ganged up on. And the people that happens the least with is licensed marriage and family therapists, because your whole training is about how to bring everybody in.
Go figure, right? Like it's amazing when I do consultations sometimes with folks who are only trained working with individuals, or I referred someone out to do individual work. They're like, yeah, sometimes have them in to do conjoint sessions. I'm like, so how frequently is that happening? Like, it's starting to be every time. Like, what training do you have to work with couples? Well, none. How's that going? Awful. Okay, well, like, come on. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Every time. So, one of the things you had mentioned too before is the wilderness background that you did with kids in Appalachia. Can you tell folks a little bit more about that?
Yeah. For about 3 years, I worked as a wilderness therapy professional with adjudicated youth. These were kids coming down from juvenile detention facilities, or had been institutionalized essentially in foster care settings or in psychiatric residential treatment facilities for a long time, and learning how to live pro-socially in a community setting again before going back into the real world.
Yeah. What I'm really curious about that is I hear you talk about going from that to the LMFT to the group leadership. My mind immediately goes to like Lord of the Flies, right? Here you are in the mountains with these kids that are dysregulated, have been hurt a lot, and probably have a lot of unhealthy dynamics with power and the flexing of power.
Oh yeah. And that's where I fell in love with it, really. And I realized rather quickly that you have to have this this very delicate, no nonsense balance on each side of being very firm and structured and clear and transparent about what is expected, the time frames it's expected in, following up, following through with them. And on the other side, being really warm and compassionate and patient with human beings on the other side of that. And what that inevitably develops is this very, very high level of trust, where folks just know that you're looking out for their interests as well as the interests of the group, and everyone being safe and as efficient as possible for getting things done. And when you say jump, they're like, all right, how high? Because they don't have to question your intent.
We talked about military leadership in I think it was our 4th episode, the idea of how that kind of direct masculine leadership looks to the public is this like aggressive, like drill sergeant kind of thing, where that doesn't motivate people more than once. Like that kind of leadership contains things, right? It can stop a problem, but it can't empower a solution.
I would say it only motivates people as much as you can actively scare them.
Yeah. So with the teenagers, I think looking at how teenage boys kind of naturally engage really informs masculinity as a whole, because it's kind of our larval state right before anything gets in the way, all of our cultural ideas, all the pain we've been in, and it just kind of shows up. Like, was there ever a moment where you learned something really profound from one of those kids?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was particularly one situation where there was actually a riot. I'd been there for a year and a half, and a group of kids figured out where there was a hunting cabin within several miles of the camp, and snuck out in the middle of the night and ran away, had a rendezvous point, broke into the hunting cabin, and took all the guns and were going to come back down and shoot up camp. And all the rest of the kids knew enough about what was going on to be totally freaked out, and a riot began, understandably so. So we're all trying to figure out what's going on, the story. We eventually were able to get enough of the story out of a few of the kids and get the groups into vans so we could get off property and get everybody safe. And there are like helicopters coming and cops with Malinois dogs and like all the things. And the group that I was in was at the time was a very like Lord of the Flies-esque. Like it was very militaristic, hyper masculine vibe, and the group leader liked to run the group with that type of mentality, and other counselors had had a really hard time intervening in that historically. I've been there for 3 to 4 months at this point in that particular group, and we were about 12 hours into that riot. It was noon one day. The kids hadn't eaten since dinner the previous night. And as saying the demographic of this group, what they're made up of, a lot of food insecurities, a lot of huge trauma histories. They start getting hungry and start not feeling safe. Stuff gets really, really hairy really quickly. And I was able to coordinate with the program director to get a box of just pretty basic food, like sandwiches, down to my boys. He rolls up in the ATV at the top of the trailhead, go up there, grab it, coming back down into the little holler, the little valley where we're at. And I'm holding this heavy case of food, and the group leader saw that my hands were full, and he'd been wanting to knock my block off for a while. He did not like me. And after meeting his dad a few times, I saw why it wasn't that he didn't like me. He didn't trust men, and the only way that he knew to feel in control was to physically dominate them. And he hadn't been able to do that with me yet up to that point. So he saw that I was in this position where I could not defend myself. And sees me, see him, we lock eyes, and immediately I'm like, oh, this is not gonna be good. Because it is also at that moment, like, I'm not letting go of this food. I've got 9 other boys in that group who are like relying on me to maintain control over these resources, and all, like, my safety and their safety depended on getting us out of there, right? So holding this case of food, He makes a beeline towards me, rears back, just cracks me. Head goes, you have the stars for a minute. I'm just kind of wobbly, primarily focused on just trying to stay on my feet and keep this food. And had a really important decision to make, right? Like, am I going to restrain the kid, make myself feel physically safe in the moment with a really high level of guarantee, and then also replicate everything that he's always experienced with more powerful men? Is it's dog eat dog, and whoever can eat is who dominates. So instead, I just decided to take the hit. And once and he's standing there going like, and also kind of in shock, because he was not expecting me to not fight back, and just kind of waiting. I'm almost like watching him watch videotape of getting his ass kicked by his dad through the years, and like what he expects to unfold in the next moment. Just look at him, and there's a look up. There's all the rest of the boys are to circle around us, being like, "Oh my God, what's about to happen?" And I look back at him like, "Hey man, are you done?" And he's just like, "Yeah." Like, "All right, can you sit down?" And he sits down. And I look at everybody else. "Can y'all sit down?" Everybody sits down. I put down the trunk of food, open it up, start passing out sandwiches, and just like nothing had ever happened, right? And because this is not the time and the place. And I also realized, once I had everybody's attention in that moment, and I could model a willingness to prioritize the tribe in safety over ego and the love of power, that this could shift the focus. And inevitably it did. We ate some sandwiches, canned fruit, got everyone's blood sugar levels up a little bit. Everyone's got their wits about them. They realized that I was a reliable leader. And after we ate, like, "All right, you all ready to go up to the van?" Like, "Yes." We're freaked out. We got to the van. We got to the rendezvous point. Everybody was safe. And it was at that moment where kind of my mind got blown a bit, being like, wow, like, it'd be great if I didn't have to absorb a sucker punch every time something like this dynamic happened. But the power of love is absolutely greater than a love of power. That's what turned me on to it.
That sounds like there's two kind of things that I'm thinking of from previous guests that kind of back up that logic and that lesson. One of them was a recent guest we had on was a Marine major that is also a children's book author and does parenting coaching. And one of the things I like about him is he is talking about, if you take a swing at somebody, the idea that they're not going to get defensive and swing back is ridiculous. Right. And so if you're in a leadership position, if you're in a position of power and you get aggressive, the idea that somebody's not going to respond with some kind of force or fall down just doesn't work. And that's what would have happened, right? Like, you and that kid might have wrestled, squished a bunch of sandwiches. You'd probably physically overpowered him, maybe. And then the other kids had just been freaked out and feeling unsafe.
It would have just kept going. It would have just kept spiraling. There had to be a very different dynamic that was going to disrupt the chaos and the unsafe feelings. And really from that point forward, in the clinical work that I was doing, I had a penchant for being the guy that was like, all right, so which cases are freaking everybody else out? Like, what are the hospital rooms that people don't want to go into?
Give me those. I'm ready.
Exactly. Exactly. And I was like a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. Like, it was, parts of it were probably not the healthiest headspace for me to be in. A few of those.
I think it's also just being a bigger guy in the field too. I think, like, one, people tend to push us towards that.
Sure.
At least in my experience.
And even just a guy in the field, right? Yeah. So predominantly female. And what I realized is that if you're fair and vulnerable with people, they lose a taste for harming you pretty quickly. I got hit in the woods, another pad of scar tissue on my arm from a kid biting a chunk of flesh out of my arm. After those days, I've never been attacked, and I've been in I put myself voluntarily in a lot of really jacked up situations with people who have a long history of violence. They haven't directed it towards me because of that stance that I maintain.
Mm. Well, and when you don't respond with the fear of it, they don't respond with the push of it, in my experience.
Being charged by a dog, you're just like, hey, bud, what's up? Smell me for a minute. We're going to hang out.
Yeah. Well, another thought that was going through my mind as you were talking about that is you'd also taken a hit before that sucker punch. You knew what it was like to get punched in the face and like what the recovery was going to look like. And I imagine part of you in that moment knew you could take that hit.
I did. And I was also a rough teenager, and ran with, birds of a feather flock together, and had familiarity with being in those types of settings. And it's not the end of the world. You get popped, life continues.
Well, I think about that a lot when it comes to like teaching guys resilience as a rule. There's kind of two ways to live a secure life. One is avoid problems and pain, right? Have a good plan, build a life of security and safety, and that's all great. But then you cannot create a perfect world and a perfect safety that feels any kind of fulfilling. And so on the other end of it, you need to know how to take the hit of whatever's coming. If you're going to go try a new job out, you need to be able to take the hit if the job doesn't work out. If you're going to move, you need to be able to take the hit if it doesn't go. And what I like about that story is that's what you modeled for those kids, of like sometimes you take the hit and get the job done.
Yeah, there's a willingness to be battle tested, and not even, sometimes it's physically, a lot of times it's emotionally or through the experience of failure. It's if you get caught up in it being a finite game and you win or lose in life based on that battle, then you completely lose the context of the bigger picture. You lose context of the war.
I think it's one of the things I see with younger guys trying to step into leadership roles that's kind of hard, is that they feel that imposter syndrome because they're leading in places they haven't been before. And I feel like that's the most dangerous place to try to come in as a leader without support, because you don't have the security of knowing you can take the hit to get the job done. What do you do with those young guys that are in that position where they're trying, these guys in the manufacturing world where they're trying to step into these leadership places that they haven't taken those hits before?
In the leadership development curriculums that we facilitate, it is partially in a group setting, and then there's also one-on-one work that happens between each group session. So they learn to take a hit with their first team, with each other, with their cohort of leaders. Not only learn to take a hit, but learn to be warm and kind and patient with each other before taking that out onto the floor. And a lot of it really is just about having the opportunity to practice safely. And practice ain't going to make you perfect, but diligent practice will absolutely make you better. And then I tend to also do a lot of reminding folks, like, bro, you're already here. Like you've arrived. You were invited into this position because you're ready to be in this position. And you might not be able to prepare a full menu yet, but the people that are in your charge, that you're responsible for leading, are hungry. And let's say you've got, like, all you know how to make is burritos, and you got a green verde sauce, and it's like kind of mild, and you got a red, like, a spicier sauce, like muy caliente, and there are like 2 different variations of burritos that these people are hungry. Just offer them like spicy or mild, and that will be fine for now. Over time, we're going to make taquitos, enchiladas. It's going to go down. But for now, just stay in the pocket and stay in the kitchen. We'll get to cooking.
Yeah, I love that. And the thing I'm thinking of as you're talking about how you integrate that, like, hey, man, you were picked to be here. You're where you're supposed to be. This is the right way to learn how to do this. I think a lot of guys, just because of all the different ways that like entrepreneurship keeps getting pushed at young guys, like, hey, go work for yourself, go do it all on your own. it undervalues the structure of support that happens when you're in an organization where you can get the tap, right? When someone in a position who has seen leaders, developed leaders, looks at you and says, I see something in you. I see you can make that burrito. Let's get you in the kitchen.
For sure. And I think it also starts leaning into this almost perverse version of independence that boys and men are socialized to champion. That very much fits into what we call today as provider protector, what used to be hunter warrior, but it's the same thing. Independence is a basic tenet of that, and it tends to get bastardized more into this extreme self-reliance and unwillingness to accept constructive feedback and unwillingness to be seen as imperfect. Like, well, welcome to the human dance, man. Like, none of us are perfect, and we are fundamentally social animals. So even the folks that go into entrepreneurship, where's your consultation group? Where's your mentor? Like, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, you go together.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Denver's a big tech town, so I end up working a lot with like tech guys, C-suite guys, and I've had 3 guys actually make it to public sale over the years that are now they're doing very, very well. All the ones that make it had a group from the beginning of the project of other people in their position. Usually at least 3, if not 5 different CEOs doing other kinds of work, but in a similar position, and a mentor, somebody who's been at it long enough to kind of keep them from losing themselves to the board.
If we could do a really broad research study of how many successful entrepreneurs have seen a process from seed to public sale, we'd come up with a really heavy, strong statistic about how many folks did that with a village versus individually.
Yeah, I think it's nice to hear more and more when you're listening to the different content being produced for young guys of the push over to community again, rather than this like 80s and 90s story of like the self-made man, which is just nonsense, right? You used roads to get to school you didn't build, like calm down.
Yeah. That were uphill both ways.
Yeah. I guess I'm kind of curious now about you, man. You started out as a kid that was kind of a roughneck out in it, and then that led you to go help kids that you saw some of that part of yourself in on kind of an individual level. And now here we are 20 years later, and now you're making leaders, which is, for me, that's the hallmark of the best leaders, right? Good leaders make more leaders.
Sure. Thought about it that way. Thank you.
But yeah, man, walk me through how you built that competence over time and what that ramp looked like from going from like helping people be better in their life and be part of the group to mentoring leaders.
I mean, one part is as a kid, I grew up in a household that was characterized with abuse and coercion, and then down the street where my grandparents lived, and my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. He actually worked in Oskar Schindler's factory in Krakow, Poland. He was 12, he was 14 when they were able to start working in the factory, and his 6 other siblings and both parents shipped off to Auschwitz, killed. And so I had this really strong juxtaposition really early of what oppression looks like, and then what a stance of integrity and courage without dominance look like. It wasn't until after he died where I even learned the stories about working in Schindler's factory and what the rest of that. It was just kind of how he was and how he operated and modeled those values. Yeah, me too. It probably saved my life. I think I would have been a class act asshole if hadn't grown up around him. That's what was modeled to me. Um, so as a young person, I was I was pretty bright. I did well in standardized testing, and I could study for 2 or 3 hours on something, skip school all quarter, and get a good grade and get to AP tests, and I got into University of Georgia with already a semester of credit, and had the highest absentee rate senior year of high school.
Funny enough, when you're that smart and that bored, you don't go.
Yeah, and also like just irreverent. I had this basic distrust for institutional authority,
Mm-hmm.
where if folks weren't going out of their way to earn my respect, I didn't give it, and I was pretty direct that I didn't care about the dog and pony show. And so in being in the public school system in Atlanta, there were way bigger fish to fry than this little white kid running around who was showing up, making good grades and turning in projects when they were due, and seemed to at least care about doing the work and wasn't actively disruptive when he was here. So they just kind of let me go under the radar. And then went to undergraduate school. I had developed pretty significant addiction, alcoholism stuff. By that point, I was 11 or 12 years old. And when I graduated from University of Georgia, that's when I looked around and realized that my friend group seemed to all be dying from overdoses and suicides or going to jail. Scared the crap out of me. And that's when I went to go work in the woods. And I got sober, started living a healthy lifestyle, had some structure myself, and started recognizing these other rhythms that worked in tribes and with people, and strongly, it felt very strongly for these young people, and they realized that I was different too than the other authority figures that they'd run into.
Well, that's that's an interesting jump, man. Like so that awareness out of college that if I stay with these guys, it's gonna happen to me at some point. Like I'm losing guys, and inevitably this is gonna happen to me. I need to get out of here. What made you pick helping teens in the wilderness? Like that feels like a unique jump for that solution.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of weird. I was in a careers and psychology class. I was majoring in psychology. I did pre-law for a semester, hated it. Did pre-med for a semester, hated it. And the psychology stuff, I would look around and like, there are not many dudes here, and like, what's going on? But it just like, I got it, and it was natural. So I continued staying there. I went to this careers and psychology class, and there would be different speakers that would come every week and talk about what they did in the field and what that looked like. And everyone was all just like buttoned up and doing their own kind of version of dog and pony show.
A lot of cardigans.
And, dude, so many cardigans. And eventually this guy came in with a long beard, unkept hair, rainbow sandals, and a Hawaiian shirt. And he was like, hey, this is what I do. I work in the woods with at-risk youth, and doing this for this long, and this is what it's about, and whatever. And I was just like, I think I
can hang out with that guy.
I can do, like, he was on the irreverent wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was like, okay, yeah. I trust that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and checked it out. Was able to put 30 days together of clean time to pass a drug test. And
having a reason always helps.
The research shows it doesn't matter why you decide to change, just that you do.
Yep.
And developed a taste for it. And once I got sober for a while and my own chemistry chilled out, and I was living this very deliberate, intentional, healthy lifestyle, and I was in a group and had peers and that were also staff that I enjoyed, and we go to concerts, go hiking, and do stuff that we love together, and have my love and belonging needs met, and started finally growing up.
Yeah, I think that the growing up concept there is always really powerful, right? When you make that transition of looking at where you've landed based on other people's direction. I feel like that's the pathway from, like birth to your mid-20s somewhere, usually maybe your 30s now. It keeps getting extended out, where you're just doing what the systems tell you to, which there's important lessons in there, right? There's a reason why we do it. But it's that point where you look around and you choose who you want to be with and you join them, that adult moment starts to happen for guys.
Yeah, that intersection with personal agency, right? It's like, well, like, who's growing? And until you take ownership over that who is, who doesn't grow.
Yeah. Well, and it gave you a reason to bring your pain into the world, right? As my guess, like looking at the psychology, understanding, at least that was my experience with behavioral health stuff in college, was like, this is interesting. Like, I want to understand how these things happen in the world. I want to understand what happened to me. I want to understand what happened to my buddies. And then it's looking for people making an impact like you think you can. And like, I think both of us were really lucky in that we saw somebody. I don't think a lot of guys studying the field do. So making meaning with that trauma for these kids, how did you go from that to working with whole family systems and couples and more systems work?
I fell in love with the idea of systems work, working with groups in the wilderness setting. And I also grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in a Jewish household where there was enough Jewish folks around that it was fundamentally safe. But at the same time, you go 20 miles in either direction and you're just in rural Georgia, at least at the time. Now Atlanta's spread out so much more. So I knew that I was also missing a lot, only being exposed to academic material in the region where I had been in the Deep South. And I had a healthy respect for, specifically, I didn't know what it was, but what I did not know in other more progressive regions, especially when it comes to systems and the juxtaposition of egalitarian versus oppressive function and ways of going about doing things. So I looked around for family systems training programs, and like the most progressive ones that I could find. I was like, I already grew up in Georgia. Like, I got that. I don't need any more of that.
Let's go stretch.
Yeah, I want the opposite. There were a few schools in San Francisco, and there was one school in Portland, Oregon called Lewis and Clark College. And the cost of living in San Francisco was ridiculous, so I went to Portland.
Well, and I'm sure after doing a bunch of wilderness stuff, the Portland vibe was kind of in alignment.
The Pacific Northwest worked. Man, I wish the sun was out a little bit more, but it works.
Fair enough. So you essentially chose discomfort. I'm going to go and I'm going to stretch.
Mm-hmm. It's been a very consistent choice.
When does the first time you remember that choice actually working for you? When did that become kind of, I'm the guy that does this?
Yeah, there was a moment as a kid where I was 11 years old, and I was physically pinned in a space. I think earlier I referred to abuse and coercion in the household. And I hit puberty kind of early. And I grew a little bit, but I put on weight pretty quickly and thickened up and had a little bit more physical prowess than my peers tended to. And there was technically, I guess you'd call them a caretaker, but a parent bully in my household who kind of pinned me in this location and was engaging me in the submission ritual that had always worked to force my compliance historically. And I realized that I was a little bit bigger now and that I could make this way more difficult for them if I was willing to. And I did. I fought my way out, and the dynamic started changing after that. Where, not to say that I was any more safe when I was at home, but they wanted to pick less fights, and I could force independence if I needed to.
You could make it a little bit more costly for them to do so.
And I realized that safety and comfort are absolutely not the same thing. and that comfort and integrity are often in juxtaposition.
Yeah, that's in pretty close alignment to my experience as well. Coming up with that, like you're small, they have physical control, and then at some point you get big enough where you can take some back, and that power transition is rough. You've taken that knowledge, that incredibly hard-earned, very painful lesson, and you've brought it into your clinical work. You're bringing it into leadership. I think one of like my goals with my pain, and it sounds like you share this, is how to get people those lessons without having to go through that. Like, I think everybody needs their inflection point. Everybody needs that point where they choose discomfort, and it's the correct choice for them to start seeing that as the possibility. But ideally, it's not happening to an 11-year-old pinned against a wall by an adult.
I would not recommend it.
So for the guys listening, right? So many of the young guys I work with, their big challenge is they've never had an opportunity for anything like that moment, right? They've had complete unearned safety for their whole life, and they feel like they're not a person who can do a hard thing. When you're working with those guys, how do you get some of those lessons to them?
I'd say a healthy balance of support and challenge, acknowledging the wisdom of their previous experiences and how they've learned to be comfortable up to that point, and also pointing out how that seems to correlate with their fear of leaving their comfort zone now, and then helping them strategically identify spaces where things are maybe 3 out of 10 anxiety provoking. Like, what's your threshold? How of exposure for being able to do this without buckling? And how do we help you identify as many of these as you can metabolize, so you can start developing a taste for this? And at the end of the day, we absolutely do develop a taste for it. You know, when you have your first taste of a whiskey or something, it's like, oh my God, like, is like, why?
It burns.
Yeah, why, what? And then, there's alcohol does what alcohol does, and then you have enough exposures to it. It's like, oh, okay, there's a little like cinnamon, or there's this like woody oaky thing going on, or it's this kind of vanilla or whatever. And I think humans really need and desire a full range of experiences. So, Rumi, the old Indian ascetic, said, variety is the spice of life. Not just like spices and cooking, like fun Indian food, right? So I need to manage the heat, but also a range of emotional experiences, right? Because at the end of the day, we know the difference between going to bed good tired and bad tired. Are you tired because you're bored and life is mundane? Or are you tired because you left it all out on the field? And I'll tell you the kind of tired that goes along with sleeping well. And I think listeners will probably know without me even saying.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've been kind of on this kick around the window of tolerance and helping guys find it. And that sounds like the frame you're working in, right? Like when I'm working with an individual guy who's trying to expand that, it's getting them to articulate that window for them. Where's something where you can push, but also keep pushing, right? And when is the moment to make a push that means you're not going to be able to push tomorrow appropriate? That leave it all on the field moment, I think, is absolutely necessary and needed. But I think it goes better when you have like smaller challenges along the way.
An achievable pace.
100%, right? Well, and a built-in recovery. And so for guys trying to build that out on a leadership, right? Like, let's say that one of our listeners wants to go and become a leader at what he does, or just has that goal in the future. What are some kind of basic things that you guide young leaders into doing to develop out that window for themselves?
A lot of it is going to be about starting with the big picture, like where do you want to get? And then, as you alluded to, working within window of tolerance, breaking it into short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. You start with long-term, and then what are the medium-term chunks? And then how do we start creating little bite-sized chunks for it? What are time frames? How do you build rest recovery into this? Let's make sure that they're very relevant for you personally and embedded within your integrity and your values. So it stays aligned with your own purpose, and it feels right, they say, even when it feels uncomfortable. And developing a rhythm for holding self accountable to those parameters. And at first it would start with me as a coach. So, what are these things? On that, this is the date that you said you're going to do this. Are you going about pacing it? What do you need on the back end of it? And just like figuring out how to progress something in the gym, at some point you no longer need a trainer. You figure out what your body responds to. You figure out how many rest days you need. You figure out what your carb intake needs to be different on higher glycogen need days. Continue to cease to get amazed, like quad focus leg days, dude, like 350 grams of carbs. That's what we're doing. That's what's happening. And then I guess even with that, is a lot of times people are surprised by what makes or breaks that process, right? Because no matter how much drive I have to get something done on a quad focus leg day, if there's not enough done in the kitchen to feed my musculature before and after that, good luck. I'm not going to be able to walk for the next 2 or 3 days, and I'm going to be in the weight's not going to progress as we go. So it's building all these pieces in to be sustainable and actually allow the person to develop that taste for it.
Yeah, I think there's 3 things in there that align incredibly well with the things I suggest. The gym analogy, I think, one, we always feel better when we move, right? Like every health outcome, every mental health outcome, some kind of exercise.
We are persistence hunters, humans, gotta move.
What's interesting is the figuring out where someone is on that, right? Like I work from everything from former military guys and athletes to, Call of Duty warriors who haven't moved from the couch in 5 years, and building that window of tolerance for them, But then the thing that I'm hearing there as well is making room to fail. Like as you try, can you take the failure of this attempt? And that doesn't mean that it won't suck. It doesn't mean that it won't hurt.
What is it, like Goggin? Yeah, embrace the suck.
Guy's a maniac.
Maybe not pure Goggins, right? But there's some things he says where I'm like, all right, I can dig that.
He's great. He's inspired a lot of people. I'm not ragging on the man. I'm just like, good Lord, the man's a maniac.
Unless you have the same DNA for his ligaments, good luck. The game is, how close can you stay to failure consistently while still recovering? Right? And the more you're willing to go there, while also can handle it physically and emotionally, the faster your curve is going to be. And within that, you got to be honest with how much you can physically and emotionally handle it. Because if you can't, you're going to get injured or you're going to crack.
Well, that was always my biggest failures, was any time that I've tried to make a push on something big on my own, I do pretty well for a while. Like I tend to be really high achieving very quickly. And then the crash happens. And what's changed it over the course of my life is having people around as a mirror. I'm good at a push, I'm good at putting my head down, but I need people around me that care enough that I trust to be able to say, this is what I'm doing. They're like, hey, have you, rested? Or, hey, you sound like you really need this to work. Are you okay? And I think that's the other thing I see with the younger guys trying to build it, is they think that they should have that awareness without anybody helping them find it.
It takes a village, man. And what we were saying before, it doesn't work without it. You might go fast initially, but you gotta go fast.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, what's the line? If you want to go somewhere fast, go by yourself. If you want to go somewhere far, go with a group.
That's a one.
Yeah, yeah. So it seems like the kind of, if we're looking at guys trying to develop out these skills, it's either find a system that you can join that has some mentorship, has some framework, some guidance where you can get the tap and you can progress. For the guys that don't have that, what have you seen work for them to find that village, to build it in?
You have to be willing to look. It's not, very seldom is it gonna just fall in your lap. Um, even think about the hero's journey concept, where you're receiving the call. Now in Lord of the Rings, the call came with the guide, Gandalf. Like, hey, it's time to go on this journey, right? Now, that's pretty distinct to that particular fantasy story. The call very seldomly, if ever, comes from the guide. You have to go seek that out, and if you're willing to work hard in seeking it out, and you're humble to the truth that they can provide, they will emerge. And I think at some point you almost have to have a radical level of faith that the cosmos will present you with that. Now, what tends to be especially tricky about that for men is kind of what we were talking about earlier, this bastardized sense of independence when it comes to extreme self-reliance, where I find that a lot of men feel like it's a weakness to ask for help, where it makes them look stupid, or some version of shame and not man enough. And the fact of the matter is that the right space or the right guide won't see it as that. And if you ask or seek, and the message that you get is shame-based and condescending, I don't really care what the content of what they said. What they told you through process is that they're not the one. And that's all you need to know. Just take it on the chin, go keep looking. As long as you're willing to suspend a bit of your own ego, what's required to actively seek.
So look for that balance of truthful information and kindness, not just critique. I think that's a really powerful frame for seeking the support that you need in your life for these things.
That it's a support and challenge. Flip sides of the same coin. One can't exist without the other.
And so for my listeners, it tends to be kind of young guys starting out, or guys trying to step into mentorship, right? And how we're having fewer and fewer options professionally for that. And that's been where our fathers got that fulfillment out of, right? And younger guys aren't really having it as much. For the guys that aren't necessarily doing this professionally, but they want to bring that mentorship in, they want to find people looking for a guide, what do you say to them?
Go ask a boomer.
Right.
And I say that
Yeah.
because they're all retiring.
Yeah.
And one aspect of just the human psyche of their level of maturity, and they look at the trajectory that they're on, even just chronological maturity with their age and getting closer to death, is something that human beings desire as they're about to reach their own expiration date, is to live on in others, right? Eric Erickson called it generativity, right? So a lot of times these individuals who are getting close to retirement, or maybe who have a couple of years of retirement under their belt and are a little thinking back in the good old days, or what kind of value do I have to offer? They still want to be of value to their community, and they want those parts to live on. So be willing to go ask some old timers if they would be willing to provide you that kind of, be in that space with you. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the ratio of them that
They've
would
got
be
the
excited by
time.
that.
Yeah, they've
Yeah,
got the time.
they got the time.
So I think that's really solid, right? And getting the cross generational wisdom back into things is wonderful. I feel like we lost a lot when the boomers didn't do a good job of getting the Xers to join the service organizations. You know, where we lost the Moose Lodges, the VFWs, there were two generations where guys just didn't kind of join those. And so I think there's something we can rebuild with that. What about the guys that are kind of middle life and looking to make an impact on younger men? Scott Galloway recently made a call in his book and his work to, if you're a man in the world and you're not doing something to improve the younger people's lives directly, you are not a good man. You are failing in the world. And I really like that mission statement, right? I think we need way more of it. What have you seen work for those guys?
Just even all humans. Yeah, figured out. You don't have to recreate the wheel. Take a look at nonprofit organizations or volunteer organizations in your immediate community that have mission statements that you resonate with. There would be several different ways that you could engage. One, just start with a little bit of volunteering and engagement with boots on the ground. Make sure that these folks are actually practicing what they preach, and that you resonate with what they're actually functionally doing, beyond the mission statement. If you already have a really high level of confidence in that, how do you get involved in their board? And if you go into these spaces and just start operating within the system, you're going to be tapped sooner rather than later to be in a position of leadership. You don't have to reinvent it yourself.
I think that's probably some of the most cogent advice around these kinds of things. I imagine in your work, just like mine, you've seen a lot of nonprofits, and nonprofit always kind of has the same life cycle where one person comes in, says they want to solve a problem, it's all ego, and then that eventually collapses when they burn out. I think that's, for guys, we're particularly susceptible to that because of that hyper independence. That, I see something, I see a problem, I'm going to fix it, as instead of taking that pause and saying, okay, I see a problem, I want to fix it. Who's doing that already? Where can I go learn, and how to join all that? And I think it also takes the pressure off of you to build something out of nowhere. This isn't like an after school special. Kids aren't playing outside much anymore. It's not like you can be mowing your lawn and see a kid that needs some guidance walk by. It's just not where it happens anymore.
No, unfortunately. And the too many places where it's super safe for kids to be walking by like that anymore.
Well, I don't know if it's not super safe for them. It's just no one has any faith that it could be. So if there was one last thing that you'd want guys that are looking to kind of take their story and turn it into leadership like you have, what would you want them to know?
We need you, man. You're here for a reason, and you always have been. I would say it's even your destiny to do this. Who are you to keep yourself from the world? Who are you to keep yourself from us? Our children need you. Come join us.
For me, when I hear these things, it's a big part of what's been missing is the invite and the acceptance of the power of joining. Yeah. I really love that sentiment. Yeah. So you've been really generous with your story through the whole episode, man, and I can't thank you enough for how vulnerable you've been with that. We always kind of come to the end of the episode with 3 questions to kind of get to know your journey with masculinity a little bit and normalize that for the other guys as well. And so to kind of close things out, the first question is, what's a truth about masculinity you learned before you were 12 that's remained true today?
The power of love, power of connection in the grand scheme is way more powerful than the love of power. The love of power might burn hot, burn quick, but it's going to clog up your gears real quick. If you want to have longevity, you want to go to bed good tired. If heroes get remembered, legends never die.
You've told a lot of stories about how you've overcome the various things. But I imagine, just like all of us, when we're exploring our younger selves and trying to figure out how to be masculine when, all of that's just starting to bud, what's a time where that pursuit of masculinity has hurt you?
And I lost a lot of years of personal development in friends to drugs and alcohol. Using drugs and alcohol to numb myself from fear and pain, the belief that it made me less of a man.
Yeah, that need for being stoic and needing the numbness to do it.
Yeah, as you're watching this or listening to this, you've heard my voice crack a few times. You've seen my eyes water. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change the experiences that I've had or the wisdom that I have, or how no nonsense I can also be. I think Bruce Lee would be like water, right? And that was the power of water. If you can't also be flexible and be resilient and lean into those parts of human emotional life, then you can't be like water. You'll be like ice. You're going to crack.
And I certainly went through this moment, and I think most guys can relate to it, where you're watching from the outside what a man is doing, and he seems stoic. He's doing a hard thing and seems stoic. And so the presumption is that you need to be like that on the inside. And what you don't know is that he's not feeling the things he's going through. It's that he knows he can handle the things he's going through and using that to propel him forward. And I think that's why it's so powerful to see guys like you express that. Coming through all your trials and tribulations, bringing that into the world to do better for people and being able to express that. I hope it gives some of those guys that are stuck in that space where they think they have to be that cool, bearing inside and outside, some hope. So the last one, and we always like to try to go out on a high note. What's a time when your masculinity empowered you?
I think that tend to be, folks assume that I won't be good at soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
Just as I'm a dude, like a shaved head, and
you look a little scary,
and I got like blue eyes, and I mean, sometimes when I'm walking out of the shower, I look in the mirror, walking by, I'm like, who's that? Like I get it, and I get from that underdog position in the soft skills. I hope people feel comfortable with me and with themselves that much more quickly because they were not expecting that from me. So, use it. If people just assume that you're not going to be good at some things when realistically you've done the work to develop those parts of yourself and be really integrated, you catch a lot of people off guard with it and make a lot more impact with it.
Yeah. Leveraging the kind of masculine presence you have and the way that people respond to that to connect and accepting that surprise as a bridge. That's powerful.
Sure.
This has been my favorite part about doing this, man, is getting to talk to other guys in the world doing good things. And I can't tell you how happy I am you're in the world doing what you're doing. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
If people were looking to work with you and find you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
You can find my coaching practice at logancohen.com, like my name. And you can also find, if you're interested in the consulting work that I do, you can find that at tnorthsolutions.com.
Well, I hope the guys that need it find you, man. I think you can help a lot of people. And that's our conversation with Logan. I'm exceedingly glad we got to share his insights and story today. As always, we fact check what we discuss, and there are 3 points that need a little bit more nuance today. First, the vast majority of the time, fairness and vulnerability are the right focus when leading, but that assumes the person you're engaging with still values connection and shared norms. So discernment, boundaries, and learning to recognize when someone is not interested in connection or norms is key to both being safe and effective. In my experience, that's a rare situation, but it's important to be able to spot, and that's something that comes with time and practice. Second, when we talk about the idea of taking the hit, that's not a call to ignore risk or stop planning. The point is about capacity, knowing you can recover when things don't go as planned. Preparation and resilience go together. Planning reduces unnecessary damage, and resilience keeps you oriented when plans fail. It's a tricky balance, so we have an upcoming episode focused specifically on the window of tolerance framework, which helps put that balance into a more practical structure. Third, a quick clarification on the spice of life idea. Rumi was a Persian poet, not an Indian, but his work strongly emphasized transformation through the full range of human experience. So he aligns with the underlying sentiment. The specific phrase, variety is the spice of life, isn't his. It's attributed to William Cowper from his poem The Task in 1785. What's interesting is that Indian aesthetic philosophy, Rumi's work, and Cowper's writing all arrive at a very similar conclusion through different traditions. That kind of convergence is usually a good sign that an idea has broad human value. If this conversation sparked something for you, I'd be curious about what part of it challenged or clarified your thinking. Feel free to leave a comment. It might help another guy find what he needs. This has been the 37th episode of American Masculinity. I'm Tim Winnicky. Thanks for being the guy trying to do better for yourself and the people around you. We'll see you next time.